a treat. Our next speaker is a gentleman well versed in Irish politics. He's canvassed every general election since 1982. I think some of you were born in 1982. He describes himself modestly as a one-man opposition to progressive Ireland. I would describe him in many, many favourable terms because he happens to be a very close and beloved personal friend of mine. But let me not be biased here, but I would say he is a walking encyclopedia on Irish politics. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome for Mr. Paddy Manning.
Thank you, Kate. Ladies, I was going to say ladies and gentlemen, but this is the IREXIT conference. Trumpists, geriatrics, little Irelanders, and you're so old. Now that we've greeted you in the formal manner that our media might like, I'd like to thank Herman for this opportunity, for being your guest here today. I want to talk about the bias in Irish media, that monotone, grey, progressive thing that tells us what to think all the time. The striking thing about civil debate in Ireland is not the tiny little thin civil debate we have, but that it is all one note. We have a national government where all the parties are basically agreed on a grab bag of progressive ideas. Abortion, same-sex marriage, transgenderism, the holiness of the EU, Michael D. Higgins as our permanent president. And our journalists believe it is their job to protect that faith. Anybody advancing a liberal cause in any way will be asked the sort of questions in an interview that would be regarded as too easy, too soft for training purposes in car communications. Go the other direction, oppose the liberal causes, and you'll be attacked with the zeal of a wolverine in the last stages of rabies. Or they'll do what they do with Herman. They keep increasing the numbers against him. They started out with 5, and they've now gone to 6 or 7. He still wins. The problem isn't that journalists have opinions. The problem is that journalists are of one opinion, and we leave the decision on what is news to a small set of clones, identical, thinking exactly the same thing. Do you listen to the Sunday morning shows? Isn't it awful? You know, it's like, oh no, I agree more with you. I hate Trump even worse than you do. It is the equivalent of listening to toddlers in kindergarten. I'm more scared of the boogeyman than you are. I'm biased. I admit it. I eyeballed Liberal Ireland for the best part of 2.5 years, and it's neither liberal nor pretty. Noam Chomsky said that in a democracy, propaganda is what a bludgeon is in a totalitarian state. We saw that bludgeon being exercised during the abortion referendum. Now again, as I say, I'm biased, so I'm relying on figures collected by the Edmund Burke Institute. Take the Savita case. From the date of her death, that unfortunate lady's death, to mid-June of this year, there have been 15,600 mentions of her on the RTE website. Of those, just 14,600 linked her death to abortion. But only 103, or 0.7%, mentioned the inquest verdict of medical misadventure. And only 60, or 0.4%, a little shave, 0.4%, mentioned the actual cause of her death, sepsis. That's a democratic bludgeon. Now, the in-house newsletter of Liberal Ireland, the Irish Times, did actually perform better. Of their 853 articles, 60 16% managed to mention sepsis, and 21 articles, 2.5%, reported the verdict of medical misadventure. Better lads, but no biscuit. It's still as Chomsky bludgeoning. That propaganda totalitarianism did not stop on the day of the referendum. In the days afterwards, we saw calls for opposition, for dissenters, to be silenced, to be removed from radio, to be barred from Twitter. The main target of that was David Quinn, a man regarded by Liberal Ireland as Pol Pot ordained into the Westboro Baptist Church. And that seemed to make it okay that it was David Quinn. In what democracy in Western Europe? And Ray spoke movingly about the changes in the EU, but mostly there's two democracies out there. In what democracy in Western Europe would journalists call for the silencing of dissenters while they were celebrating a win for the government? Is a state like that still a democracy? No, it's not in many ways. And remember, that alliance between the journalists and the politicians isn't just a marriage. It's a menage a trois between the journalists, the politicians, and the new social media. The Silicon Valley Huxleyites making a brand new Zucker world where they will tell you what to do. They will gather your data. They will direct the ads. And woe betide you if you're a Conservative or Herman Kelly. Far too much of our politicians' national self-esteem depends on having the HQs here. Look, people, we matter. We've got Google and Twitter and all of those. When Google says jump, Varadkar asks, is this high enough from mid-air? You're today engaged in the worst of all possible heresies for that menage a trois. You are talking against the EU. I've seen you trap speakers who thought that leaving the EU was a good idea. Have you any real idea of how bad and evil you are? Well, hello, fellow heretics. But there are consequences to an echo chamber this deep, this bad. The deliberate ignoring of the opinions and beliefs of 1/3 of the people at any one time is poisonous for democracy. And it also shows us just how hypocritical the liberal media is. They talk about an inclusive country, but they want to exclude you. They talk about trusted women, but they don't trust you or you down there. You're not to be trusted. Worse again, bad ideas thrive when they're not examined and debated. When we don't examine the emotional arguments put forward by liberal politicians, because we can't, they thrive. We can't solve national problems if there's no national discussion. Media is how a democracy talks to itself. If we can't have that debate, if we're not allowed to debate big issues, which we're not, well then the big issues don't get solved. Media isn't the message. Marshall McLuhan was wrong. Media is just a method. It's just wires and screens, and they're not the problem. The problem is, in the words of Gary Kavanagh, every journalism school is a liberal madrasa. It's a faith school for liberals, turning out good little bigots who don't realise that the fact that they all converge on the one idea isn't a sign of intelligent people reaching the right conclusion, but of absolute rancid bigotry in operation. There are honourable exceptions, but they're not the ones who are asked back to the journalism school to speak to students or receive honorary doctorates. You started the debate here today about media, about our role in Europe, about where we are. The media is very taken up at the moment with anniversaries. It's the anniversary of this, or the anniversary of that. And most of those are 100 years ago. But the most important anniversary in modern Ireland, the 10-year anniversary, is coming up upon us fast. And it's not going to be covered. And if it is covered, it will be covered in camouflage and lies and deceit. On the 29th of September 2008, the government announced a banking guarantee. A banking guarantee because every